Welcome to The Sound of Economics, the podcast series brought to you by Bruegel, the Brussels-based economics think tank. We're entering European Money Week, and there are a number of events in town here in Brussels to help us understand money issues and how to improve financial well-being. In today's episode, we revisit the topic of financial literacy, a topic that is becoming more relevant as we're increasingly all asked to make more autonomous decisions about our finances, cater for our own financial security across our lifespan. I'm Maria de Mergis, I'm the Deputy Director at Bruegel, and I'm joined today by Annamaria who is University Professor of Economics and Accountancy at the George Washington University School of Business, and also the founder and academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, and since recently also a non-resident fellow here at Bruegel. Welcome back, Anna, to our podcast series.
Thank you, Maria, for inviting me. So happy to be here today.
Anna is joined by her long-time co-author and partner in financial literacy research issues, Maarten van Rooij, a senior economist at the Economics and Research Division of the Nederlandse Bank, the Dutch Central Bank. Welcome, Maarten, and it's a great pleasure to have you in our series.
Thank you, Maria, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to participate.
Maarten, you have recently released a new paper, and I believe you've done this with another two authors. In fact, it was a paper released on the 8th of March to coincide with International Women's Day with a very striking title, A Fearless Woman. And it's an attempt to shed some light to a rather well-known fact, and that is that women are less financially literate than men. Anna, Maarten, you have worked on these issues before. Anna, what is the new insight that your paper is bringing to us?
First of all, I'm very happy to be able to present this paper today. It is joint to work with Maarten, but also Tabea Buchenkoenen and Robalessi. And it is part of this long-standing project that we have been working on for several years. What is new here is that we look deeper at this gender difference in financial literacy. And the fact that when you look at how women answer financial literacy question, they tend to disproportionately, with respect to men, say, I do not know. And this is true around the world. This is the striking finding. And with this project, we are able to pin down a little bit more what's driving, in a sense, this gender gap in financial literacy. So because women tend to say, I do not know, we don't count them as answering correctly. But in a sense, the count is not quite right because they didn't give a wrong answer. They said, I do not know. So what we did, we did another survey where we took away the do not know options. And we saw that women actually answer the question correctly on average, or they tend to answer the question correctly. However, they were not confident about their answer, even when the topic or the question was relatively simple. And what is new, to come back to your question, is that we are able to quantify how much that confidence matter. And to put it in a number, it matters 1/3. So 1/3 of the gender gap in financial literacy can be explained by lack of confidence.
So let me understand this. So if you were to force women to actually answer, then they can actually get it right. Is that what you mean?
Many of them, and often, they get it right. So in a sense, women know more than they think they know. They still know less than men. So, forced to answer, sometime and more often than men wrong. But the gender gap really shrink once we, in a sense, force women to answer. They often know the answer. The question is they are not sure about it.
I see. Maarten, can I turn to you? It's not just that women are less financial literate, right? I mean, there are pronounced differences on other aspects of financial inclusion. Do you think that this is the result, or is it the cause of poorer financial literacy in amongst the genders?
So an important motivation for our study was indeed that we see not only these differences in financial literacy, but also financial inclusion worldwide. So this relates to income levels, average income levels of women, but also to how much women save compared to men. And thinking about what is causing what, then I think it's a little bit of both. So in our previous work, and also other researchers, they found convincing evidence that financial literacy is related to savings behavior, for instance. So people with more financial knowledge accumulate more savings. And it makes these people in a less financial vulnerable situation, in the sense that they have a buffer stock, unforeseen expenses, but they also have more savings for retirement, for instance. So there's certainly an effect from financial literacy on financial inclusion, but it's also very likely that there is an effect the other way around, in the sense that the best way of learning is accumulating knowledge is by doing, by having experience. So when you are in a good financial position, then you're also likely in a better opportunity to acquire knowledge. So I think it works both ways.
I see. So let's just take a step back and understand actually what this all means. I mean, it's interesting to say that, those who have greater financial literacy skills, they will do better in terms of preparing for the future, if I understand correctly your argument, Maarten.
Yes.
And of course, the other way around. I mean, if you don't have good financial literacy skills, then you're bound to save less. And of course, in an environment where we need to more and more cater to our own financial future, if we don't have the right skills, then we are potentially vulnerable. And of course, women, as lagging behind, are more vulnerable. Is that correct, Anna?
It is correct. And in fact, we have in particular studied the link of financial literacy to financial fragility, also in a project we did for Bruegel. And as Maarten said, there is this very strong link with financial literacy and a series of behavior. What we study in a paper is a behavior which is quintessential finance, right? When people think of finance, they think of the stock market and investing in the stock market. So on purpose, we chose investing in the stock market as an outcome of our paper to see whether knowledge and also confidence affects the stock market investment and behavior and participation in the stock market. But I want to repeat and highlight what you have said, which is that financial literacy is connected to many other behavior, including, for example, being able to protect yourself against shocks, including, for example, to navigate the very difficult economic environment today. And this is why I think financial literacy is important more than ever, and it becomes important more than ever in a time of crisis.
Tell us a little bit about your title. I mean, what's the symbolism here? I presume you're referring also to the fearless girl, the famous statue outside the stock exchange in New York. But what's the link here? How do you become a fearless woman?
It is indeed connected to that. And we use the fearless woman inspired by the fearless girl, the statue of this girl that was put across from the raging bull and then is now sitting in front of the New York Stock Exchange. And we love that image. I think it has become iconic, but also giving a wonderful message that, girl shouldn't be fearless. And fearless exactly in finance, in making financial decisions. We chose woman because we hope that, the fearless girl will grow into a fearless woman. And this is why the title is Fearless Woman, Financial Literacy and Participation in the Stock Market.
That's what a wonderful image there. And you've been very successful in projecting this image through the choice of your title. We will come, and I'd really like us to think a little bit of what we can do about this. How do we turn the fearless girl into a fearless woman when it comes down to issues of financial knowledge? Let me turn back a little bit closer to the paper again. Tell us a little bit of what you've actually done in the paper. You use something called the Dutch Household Survey. If you could tell us a little bit what this is, and how did you go about investigating this question?
We have this annual survey that's sponsored by the Nederlandse Bank, Central Bank of the Netherlands. It's a survey on income and wealth, and that explains the way that we sponsor it, explains the name DNB Household Survey. But we also use it for some special modules, and for our research we designed 2 special modules that were given to the respondents 6 weeks apart. And the first module had the traditional financial literacy questions. These are also called the Big Three. These are often used in the academic literature. And these measure the understanding of interest compounding, inflation, and risk diversification. And these are multiple choice, but they include a don't know option. What we found in our previous research is that women score lower on financial literacy. This has to do with that they make more mistakes, but it even has much more to do with that they chose don't know a lot more often than men. So what we now did was 6 weeks later, we went back to the same respondents. We asked the same questions, but now without the don't know option. The respondents were forced to give an answer. And after each question, we also asked them, how sure are you about your answer? How certain are you? So they have to give an answer. And what we now notice is that women were less certain in their answer, often say don't know when they are given an option. but when this option is not given, they often have the answer correct. And using this information from both surveys, we were able to come up with separate measures for true knowledge and for this underconfidence. And if you then look at the traditional measure and you make a deconstruction, then you can see that 2/3 of the difference is in true knowledge, and 1/3 is due to this underconfidence.
So, can I ask you, tell me a little bit about who the respondents are. So, this is Dutch households, and they are just ordinary Dutch households, or are they have a specific knowledge, or they lack specific knowledge?
No, so this is a household panel of respondents. There are about 2,500 households. This is a random representation of the Dutch population, and the survey is run by the University of Tilburg. But they have participants from all layers in the population. So the rich, the poor, the knowledgeable, the less knowledgeable, high educated, low educated, men, women. It's really representative of the whole population.
So it's fair to say that the answers that we get there really represent what the Dutch average man and woman know and do not know.
Yes, very much.
But that begs the question. I'm going to turn to Anna. Anna, is this a result that is very specific to the Netherlands, given that this is based on the Netherlands data, or do you suspect that this is actually broader than this? This is representative of, dare I say, the truth?
I'm pretty confident that this applies everywhere. So we know that this gender difference in financial literacy everywhere around the world is driven by disproportionately choosing I do not know by the women. So even though we haven't done the actual study and replicate this actual study in other countries, my expectation is that we will find the same thing over and over. And I think this is a striking finding. This is why it's important, for example, to look at international data. When we first did this work, and this was using data in the US, we noticed this gender difference in financial literacy, but it took us years and years of work to see that it was there everywhere. And it was there because women tended to answer, I do not know, which, in some cases, you can think it might be even an appropriate answer if you're not sure, why should you guess? But at the same time, as we say in the paper, sometimes, that attitude becomes fear more than anything. And fears might actually not be good in financial decision making.
So it's very interesting. So let me summarize. So you ask people, how financially literate are you through these big three questions that Maarten now outlined, and you've given them multiple choice answers. And you do two experiments. One has got the I don't know option in them. When you remove that I don't know option in them, you actually find out that women do a lot better. So when you force them to be a little bit more confident, women actually would demonstrate better knowledge than otherwise, which is, of course, a very interesting result. And what you say is that 1/3 of that difference in the knowledge of financial aspects between men and women is explained by this confidence factor, right?
Yeah, so, the econometrics is relatively complicated because we had to exactly figure out how much is knowledge versus confidence. And so the paper goes into those details. But let me just say, in a sense, it's a matter of counting. It comes down to say, the fact that you say, I do not know, shouldn't count 0. Right? Because in fact, there is some knowledge in that I do not know. It's just that perhaps you are not certain 100%. And so that's why getting information on, your do not know and also your confidence allows us to be able to be precise, much more precise in figuring out how much of that gender gap is due to not being sure about your knowledge.
That's very interesting. We'll come back to that. How do we make sure that women are more sure? How do we encourage women to actually dare? To the extent that I understand your argument, this is really, you just need to dare more. And it's a very well-known fact that women don't dare as much as men, right? So part of it is also understandable. But let's go back a little bit, Maarten, if I can turn to you, to the other 2/3. So, this variable, the lack of confidence, explains 1/3 of the gender difference, but there still is a 2/3 that remains. It's a very persistent result, and it's not bound to the Netherlands. It is true across all surveys that have been done. Women are less financially literate than men. They're also less confident, but they remain less financial literacy and therefore more vulnerable than men in terms of preparing for the future. What kind of insights can you give us as to why women are less financially literate than men?
Yes, this is of course a very important question. There's no obvious reason why women would score lower in financial knowledge than men. If I look at my country, for instance, girls aged 15 have similar levels as boys aged 15 in terms of numeracy and mathematical skills, which are important also for financial knowledge. So this is indeed an important question, and explanations that have been given all seem to fail to explain the difference, in the sense that maybe people specialize within the household, who's taking financial decisions, who's taking other jobs. This type of explanations don't seem to work. One big question that I would love to see investigated is whether it's related to differences in interest in economic and financial matters. And then the question is, when these are relevant, where do these differences come from? Because we know that differences in this type of preferences, they exist already at a young age. And then the question is, has that to do with role models? A lot of these preferences, they start arising unconsciously, so without a very clear explanation. So I would really love to see that more research is done on that. But to be honest, we have to be modest here. Up to now, we know very little. We were already very happy that we were able to explain 1/3 of the difference in our paper.
Yes, of course, certainly. I mean, that is certainly progress. And also if you can find out ways of promoting the confidence that's going to eliminate that, at least that 1/3. But it still is kind of a fascinating thing. I mean, as you say, the literacy, general knowledge or education levels of boys and girls, certainly at that age, the early ages of maturity, are not very different. It seems something happens, once we come of age and once, financial decisions are of relevance to our well-being, that women just simply tend to lag behind of this. And, it's interesting you say about the lack of interest. I mean, in this podcast, we are not very representative in terms of women representation in economics or finance. I think particularly at the university level, there's a very gross underrepresentation of women, particularly set of subjects, macroeconomics, finance, very few women. Is it the lack of interest that, what is it intrinsically about macro and finance that is uninteresting to women? Anna and I are not the right people to answer that question. But I mean, it would be important to try and get to the bottom. Why is it that women underperform? And in particular, because it's not as a choice of career. You are saying through your research that the lack of literacy skills implies vulnerabilities of the financial well-being, right, Anna?
Yes, indeed. And I just want to mention a couple of things related to this. First of all, we have looked at the PISA data because it looks at 15 years old. And it was very interesting to see, for example, that in a country like Italy, those gender differences start forming at that young age. And we found two interesting facts as well, which is that they might be driven by stereotyps. So, for example, girls are more financially literate in the family where the mother works, right? And so, they might be observing and might learn from the mothers in particular. And so that can be another reason why we see women potentially, for example, being so different, particularly in Italy, where the labor market participation, the female labor market participation is so low. Interestingly, we also saw that financial literacy is higher in the area in the city that were commercial route in middle age. So, it has even an historic root, which might have to do with the development of society, and how women participated into the economic activity. And this is important, but at the same time, I feel scary, which is that if it is driven by, history, then we need to break the cycle. And I think that hopefully is the message also of this paper, that, it's time to break this cycle of differences in financial literacy. And it's time to push the women, in a sense, to become more fearless. And it is time to break history.
It's interesting because Maarten also talked about role models, right? I mean, a very, very well-known fact, the absence of role models leads you one way. And as you say, Anna, if you do have the role model in the form of a mother or any other role model that you can think of, you can actually make difference. And of course, that brings us to, what can we do about it? Huh? I mean, your paper, which is an absolutely fantastic addition to improving our understanding of what we can do about it, talks about confidence. Let's talk about confidence first. Maarten, what kind of things would you like to do, or do you think can help women bypass this fear and, actually reflect the true knowledge of their financial skills?
I think in education, it's important not only to focus on actual knowledge, on the very basic understandings, but also in what you do with the knowledge. What is the result in actual behavior? Because we know that by doing it, by experience, that you also learn and then you bring it into practice. So in education, it would help to make it very much more practical. And it would also help, I think, if teachers encourage their students to bring what they learn in practice. Because when you do things in real life, then also your confidence level will raise up to the standard to what you see happening.
In fact, it's an interesting point because, one thing I do know about financial literacy, that it's not just about whether you know what inflation is. You also know what to do with this information. If you understand what inflation is, then you know that, let's say, the purchasing value of your wages will go down if inflation is increasing. So, then you start organizing your wealth accordingly because you want to cater for this thing. So it's not just about technical knowledge, is about how to put it to good use, which I think this is, of course, what financial literacy is. So you're saying that it's not just about teaching the girls what inflation is, but also giving them, providing opportunities to put that knowledge into good use.
Yes, it's very likely that will relate to this confidence component. So in the past, we always focused on the knowledge component, but the education should also focus on this confidence component.
Anna, how do we make women more confident?
I want to say before I answer this question that, I have taken the message from this paper into my classroom as well, where I noticed the same gender difference, meaning, my female students do not raise their hand. And when I ask questions, they are a little bit less hesitant in answering and so on. And so, I am encouraging them now and literally, try to ask them in particular to answer the question and encourage them to answer. But coming to your question, I think encouragement is particularly important. And I do think we need to repeat this message over and over, that it is okay to be afraid, but you have to do it nevertheless. Because the message of the paper is that it's not just financial literacy is lower, but that financial literacy matters. And, it has consequences. It brings benefits. And it has cost if you don't have it. So, that's why it's critically important for women, for example, to be financially independent, and they should work toward it. And they should, as I said, break this cycle of being afraid and therefore not taking actions. The people really speak of, what it means not being confident and not being literate. You are left behind. Your wealth is not going to grow enough if you don't participate in the market, or if you don't save enough, or if you mismanage your debt. Here we focus on the stock market because I think it's so quintessential finance. And I can think of many other ways in which, you can be more confident. If you feel insecure or unsure, bundle up with friends, maybe create a circle of supporter so that you'll try to win the fear, or, maybe consult with somebody that you feel confident about. But, certainly do not be just led by your fear, which brings to inaction. So the message here is we need to be active. You need to be less fearful. And also the message is, the fear doesn't help. So get out of that fear because it's not helping you. And what you can do, it's beneficial.
So, I think that message is very clear. It's important to try and alleviate that fear factor that is preventing women from actually making good decisions. Can I perhaps finish on a much more general note of financial literacy in general, irrespective of the gender dimension, just also for the benefit of our audience to discuss a little bit financial literacy as a tool for better outcomes, better household outcomes, better macroeconomic outcomes, less fragile households. You have both done a lot of work on financial literacy, and can you give us a bit of a feel? And I'll start with you, Maarten. What kind of things financial literacy delivers and why? And of course, what can we do to promote financial literacy at all levels of our education system, from primary school all the way to lifelong learning? What is it that you would advise us to do to make sure that financial literacy is an effective tool of promoting wellness?
That's a very important question. We have shown actually that financial literacy matters for all financial decisions that you almost can think of. So I talked already about savings. But we have also shown that literacy measures for retirement planning. So only the act of starting a retirement plan is very much related to being literate or not. It's related to decisions related to debt, to mortgage debt, credit card debt. In all these areas, financial literacy helps. And then the question is, how can you promote financial literacy? As said, schools are the starting point, because what you learn when you're young, that you can use that when you're old, and then you can benefit your whole life from a higher level of financial literacy. When you're already at an adult age now, then I would say it's important that you show interest in financial topics. So if you want to, there's a lot of information available, for instance, via consumer organizations. Anna already mentioned this. You can talk to others about financial decisions, so you can learn from your own experience, but you also can learn from the experience of others. And I think these are very easy tools, tricks that you can use to increase your own financial expertise.
Indeed. And Anna?
I want to use the word that the OECD PISA uses to define financial literacy. It is an essential skill in the 21st century to participate to society. So to me, it's very well describes why this is so important to have. You need now to know about finance to be able to participate to society. And I want to also echo what Maarten said about how can we promote financial literacy. I think there is a very critical important role for school. But I think, financial literacy need to be compulsory in school, because if it is not compulsory, then I think we are leaving a lot of people behind, in particular women, that might not acquire it easily, for example, at home. And also today, the world is very different. And so what can we acquire just by watching other might be limited and might not be, what we really need as we look at this very different world in front of us. I think we need to start as early as possible, from elementary school, and we need to continue this at the university as well. I teach personal finance since actually 2013 here at the George Washington University, and I think it is a very important course that prepare our young people to a very different and much more challenging world. But I also would like to end with the title of our paper, which is, Women, the fearless girl needs to grow into a fearless woman. And in the same way, we have put a statue in front of the New York Stock Exchange. In New York, I would like every country to put a statue of their own girl. I would love a Dutch-looking girl in front of a stock exchange in Amsterdam. And I would like to see it in Italy, and I would like to see it in all these other countries. To remind women that these financial decisions also are important to them. And that if women and girls are fearless, they will benefit and society will benefit because they will be more financially independent, more financially secure, and more in charge of their future.
So if I take your message, start as early as possible. And the added advantage of that is that in the process, you might be also working on the confidence of young girls and ensuring that by the time they become women, that fear component is no longer interfering with the financial decision or otherwise. Thank you very much both for coming to the Sound of Economics today. It really is wonderful to speak to you about a topic that is no doubt very important, not only for the gender gaps, but also for sustainable outcomes and economic outcomes, good outcomes that are going to have an increase in our financial well-being. Anna Luzardi and Maarten van Rooij, thank you very much for joining us. That is all from us today from the Sound of Economics. You can find all our material and indeed the podcast itself on the Bruegel website at www.bruegel.org. That will be all from us, and thank you. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Bye-bye.